thank you all for joining us today on this one of our webinar series on the student success frameworks. And today we're going to be exploring flexible learning. So my name is Dr. Kay Hack. I'm lead consultant education with Advanced HE, and I'll be introducing my co-hosts in a moment. So my team have led the development of the student success framework series, and so we're really excited to be sharing this webinar series with you to explore how they're actually being used in practice and how these thematics really are resonating with how we develop that excellent student experience. So please do use the chat function to say hello and welcome. I see we've got quite a few Australians joining us. I'm joining you from a very dark and cold north coast of Ireland at the moment. So sun has not quite come up yet where I am, but hopefully you're all enjoying some better weather where you are. Okay, so I'm going to start the presentation as people join. So just a little bit of housekeeping to start off with. If we can ask colleagues to keep the webcams turned off and microphones muted, unless you're asked to share. So the format is that we'll have a couple of presentations from our colleagues who I'll speak to, I'll introduce in a moment, and then we'll have a Q&A, and it might be that we invite you to turn your camera on and webcam on when we're having that discussion. The event is being recorded, so we do know that a lot of people register for these events so they can watch the recording afterwards and share with colleagues, and we're really pleased for you to be able to do that. As both of the speakers give their presentations, please use the chat function to post any questions that you have for the speakers. Some of those the speakers may deal with as we go through, but there'll be time at the end for a short Q&A to cover off those questions. But please do keep posting those. If you experience any technical issues, then please just message Anisha Shanga via the private chat, so you should be able to pick her name up in the chat box. I've noticed a few people joining us from the UK and from Dublin and Ireland, so welcome somebody that's on the same island as me this morning anyway. So I'm really pleased that I'm joined today by Professor Liz Johnson, who's Senior Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Deakin University, and Dr. David Santandreu Calonge, Head of Educational Programme Development at MBZ UAI in Dubai. And both of these speakers, I think, are going to give some really interesting insights into flexible learning and what it looks like in their context. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the work that Advanced HE have done on the frameworks for enhancing student success. We've expanded, these were first published in 2016, and over the last 5 years we've refreshed, we've reviewed the literature, looked at how the literature's changed sort of from up until sort of 21, 22, so sort of 5 years of updated literature, and then discussed all of those themes that came out of the literature with colleagues, our members all around the world across our global membership base. And from that, we kind of really drew out some of the more emergent themes. So we all know that the literature slightly lags behind practice. So we kind of started with that base of the literature, and then we explored what that was looking like in practice for colleagues. And from that, we developed the frameworks. And so I'm really excited about how the frameworks are coming out. We expanded the areas of provision. We've included inclusive pedagogy, we've included sustainability and entrepreneurship. All are now in the mix. So if you haven't looked at those frameworks, they're all completely available for you to download and explore. And today we are going to be obviously looking into the flexible learning framework, but all frameworks are structured in the same way. So they all have student at the centre. They all have a focus on the role for the educator, and surrounding that is what does the institution need to be able to do in order to sort of support whatever the thematic area, whether it's flexible learning or any of the other 9 themes that we explore in the frameworks. And it's clear, obviously, that the institution has a key role in driving the embedding of these thematic areas. So obviously they set the vision and the mission for the institution, and that's used to inform strategic priorities. They have to invest and ensure that the correct infrastructure is there. And that's not just the digital infrastructure, but obviously the physical learning spaces, and both formal and informal learning spaces that students need to learn. And I think, when we explore what this looks like in practice, we recognise that students need to learn informally on campus as well as at home. If they're coming onto campus for certain classes, they need to be able to use those resources all day long to keep them on the campus to help them engage with the content. And they also have a role in developing those external relations with stakeholders, whether that's employers, whether that's professional bodies. So that they have a critical role in driving the framework forward. It'd be interesting to see, if you want to pop in the chat, where do you classify yourself? Who do we have in the audience? Are we institutional leaders, or are we educators, practitioners? In our discussions on the frameworks, we come up with this idea of educators plus, because we wanted to make sure that in this kind of context, we were thinking about everybody who has a role in student success, and different institutions and different cultures kind of frame this in different ways. Yes, there's the academic standing in the classroom, or the academic tutors and those people that have that direct subject knowledge that are supporting the students to learn. But we know now that there's so many other people in an institution that are important to drive student learning: professional services, career services, academic support. All of these different colleagues are there to help the students succeed. So in this part of the framework, we really recognise the role of all of those colleagues in supporting the student. When we were looking at what the educator role was in that educator plus mode, we really recognise that flexible learning has to be pragmatic. We have to we can't offer infinite choice to every student, because we'd have no cohort identity, we'd have no cohesion, and students would miss a lot of that kind of social aspect of learning. So it's around providing some flexibility, some choices as far as possible, but underpinning that is that message to promote independent learning, so that the student has the agency in order to guide themselves in terms of what and where and when they learn. We need to think about what opportunities can we add for students to develop the skills necessary, not only just to learn flexibly within while they're studying for their degree or their formal learning, but also to go on to become online learners or independent learners for the rest of their careers. Because I think we all recognise now that you don't get a single inoculation of education at 18 and that does you for life. I'm afraid we all need boosters. We all need to continue to learn throughout our careers in order to sort of thrive and be successful. So that independent learning skills is absolutely critical now. And also thinking back to our educators again, the framework also thinks about their professional development and their learning and how they keep their current practice, or their practice current, I should say. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, the frameworks look at the students. And here we sort of really think about the competencies that the students need to be able to have the opportunities to develop through their degree, as I say, in order to learn flexibly through their programme of study, but also for the rest of their career. So they were going to have to work and learn in online and hybrid environments. We've got this wonderful meeting this morning, which gives us the opportunity to interact and collaborate with colleagues all around the world. And we've all developed that skill, haven't we, in the last few years about how we work these things. I say that tentatively, as I'm hoping that my Zoom presentation will keep us together. But yeah, so we've learned these skills and we've developed these skills. But it's not just about presenting online, isn't it? It's about collaborating online, about finding and networking, etc. So it really is an important skill set to be successful. But they're also subject specific and the more generic digital capabilities that our students will need to develop. And I think the onset of AI and generative AI and the role that's going to take in the workplace has really accelerated that need to us to think about what digital capabilities students will need. And also students need to think about what and why they're learning, why are they making certain choices, what are their aspirations, what do they enjoy doing, and how can they kind of frame their program to make sure that it achieves their own learning goals. So there's an awful lot in there. There's an awful lot in those frameworks. I really encourage you to have a deep dive into those and connect with myself and my team if you would like the opportunity to explore those further and how you can make sure that you provide those opportunities for your students. Oh, that's the end of my bit. Don't go on to the Q&A yet. Hopefully that just gave you a little bit of a flavour of what we're trying to do with the frameworks. I can see in the chat everybody's responding to my question about what their roles are, and it's great to see such a wide diversity of colleagues joining us this morning. But it gives me a great pleasure now to hand over to Liz, who's going to really talk us through their approach at Deakin. And yeah, I'll hand over to you now, Liz, if I manage to stop sharing.
Thanks, Kay.
Okay, yeah, over to you.
Okay, so good evening for me, folks, from where I am. I'm hoping that that is now looking like a presentation for you. I'm joining you this morning, or this evening for me, this morning for many of you, from the lands of the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional owners of the country here in Melbourne, in the very southern bit of Australia, so possibly diagonally through the globe from where you are, Kay. And my university, I think I'll start by introducing you to a little bit about my university here, because it helps us to explain how flexible learning is built in through everything that we do here at Deakin. Deakin's based in Victoria, in the southern part of Australia. We're a big university. We're just under 60,000 students here. The majority of them, about 2/3 of them, are undergraduates. But probably the bits that are most relevant here are that about 1/3 of our students enrol in online courses. That may bring them to campus occasionally or never, depending on what they wish to do. And we were established in that mode. So I've got a little timeline on the right there. We were established in 1974, and part of our establishment mission was distance education. So during the 1980s, we were really focused on doing the best possible distance education that we could. But of course, with the availability of widespread computing and the internet, we pretty quickly moved to digital delivery. First of all, through early ed tech in the 1990s, and then into the 2000s with an approach we called Deakin Online. We moved that to around 2010 to something that we called Cloud Deakin. And the idea there was to make digital learning pervasive through the university, not just for our online learners, our digital learners, but for everybody. And by this stage, of course, most universities in the world were well entrenched in learning management systems. In this decade, from about 2020 onwards, we've really been looking at refining that approach. And so I now say that all Deakin learners learn online, just some more than others. We still have about 33% of our students studying in online courses, but about 60% of our students will choose at least one online unit to thread through their on-campus degree. We built our approach to flexible learning from an evidence base, and as is noted in the Advanced HE guide, which I applaud, great work there from the Advanced HE team, and congratulations, Kay. But it's really important to be evidence-based around this. So I've just pulled out a few things here. One is that learners now expect flexibility, particularly post-pandemic, where many of us were locked in our homes for extended periods. We expect to be able to work digitally and in person. So flexibility is increasingly expected. And as we expand participation in higher education, we're bringing in more and more diverse learners. And what flexibility looks like for one learner is not the same as it will look for another. So one size really doesn't fit all. And then picking up on a point that Kay made on the way through, we need to balance personalised learning and that idea of independence with collective learning and belonging. But however you design it, all good learning is active, when it should be constructively aligned, it should be engaging and relevant, it should be intentionally designed, and it should be evidence-based. And it should be fostering those independent learning skills and lifelong learning. And I've just put a tiny little graphic down the bottom there, how as learners develop maturity, they move from a scaffolded environment to more and more independence. The other point I want to make before I dive into what Deakin's done is to think about what this idea of personalised learning means, which relates to flexible learning in that it responds to the individual. And in the past, that's meant things like automatic learning instruction, which sends the learner down a particular pathway. But I think it's much more accurately or more appropriately described in, as I've quoted here from Farley and Burbles in 2022, which talk about having multiple alternative pathways. So the learners can pursue their educational opportunities how it suits them, their needs, their interests, their situations and their learning preferences, which leads me now to how we responded to this challenge of diversity and the need to be flexible. And the big message I want to give you here is that what Deakin did was to think institution-wide, to really focus on a holistic response. And we've kind of captured it in this diagram, which puts together three lenses which we shared across our programs. So there's this idea of portfolio design. What kind of courses do you offer if you want to provide flexible learning? And that gives you flexibility that comes through timing, through how frequently you offer entry and exit and progression through your courses. We have a trimester system here, and we try to ensure that learners can learn in all 3 trimesters, so accelerate or modulate their progression through the degree. As I've been saying to you, we offer both online and on-campus learning, and our on-campus learners can choose to embed online unit subjects within their on-campus degree. And we've played a lot with stackable degrees. How would you carry learning from one degree to another so that you're recognising the portability of learning and its involvement in subsequent lifelong learning activities? That all dovetails in with learning design. So how do you design the learning itself? What do you do with the learning to suit flexible learners? And I'll come back to this in a minute. We're drawing on a number of well-evidenced frameworks, including deliberative design, learning through discussion, the great work of Diana Laurillard, and of course based in the foundation idea that learning is what the student does from John Biggs and Catherine Tang. We put that together though with the underpinning that the university provides around service, what will help students to learn, what creates an excellent learning environment, and also, without forgetting, team design. How do we bring the right teams together to address this multifaceted and complex issue? Now, what I'm going to do with the next few minutes is just pick out a few things out of that wealth of work to show you what it looks like when we think about it from an institutional perspective. So I'm really taking that institutional lens here. So one of the things that we have done, I'll just get my thing to move on. Whoops. Oh dear. Okay. Excuse the technical glitch. We will get on here just a bit. Oh, excuse me. There we go. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was course design and this idea of flexible course design, which allows learners to make decisions about what their study plan will look like. In the middle here, I've got a picture from our learning management system. It's a specific unit. We call them units, you might call them subjects, where learners come together around that particular module of learning. And in our units, we welcome both online and on-campus units into the same space. So it's a common space where all our learners are together. And using that as our common ground, we allow students to choose whether they're going to be on campus or online. They do have to elect that before they enrol or as they enrol, so we know where learners are going to be. And I'm very interested to hear what David's got to say a little bit later about more flexible modes of doing that. But the approach here is to give students control over the pace and the scheduling of their learning. I'll move on now. The next one, I really want to just take a snapshot at is the idea of learning design. And our guiding principle here about exploring which mode we want is really linked to what we want the learners to achieve. So using what works best, which is why we get to the point of all our learners having access to online, because there's some instances where online learning is obviously the best place to be. If you're thinking about exploring information is now digital, and you would be doing that online however you had elected to do your study. So what we ask our unit chairs, our course designers to do is to match the learning outcomes with the practice in the discipline, with authentic practice, to give a mix of the kind of learning modes that work. And then we help the learners to choose how they match that up with their needs, their own needs. Then we get to the idea of service design, and the overriding guide here is that we know that we've got both online and on-campus learners. So our first approach is to make sure that study assistance, student management, any resource that the students need can be accessed online. And we do that again through common portals where both on-campus and online students can use the portals. I'm sure that it's true for most of your university libraries now that the vast majority of resources that students use are actually digital resources. Even though I ideally love going into a library and sitting amongst the books, the reality is that when we're looking at resources, they're online. So we begin by offering our services online and flesh that out with on-campus support for our students as they come in. So our support is multimodal, and we help students to decide whether when they have an online interaction, do you need to come in? Do you want to talk to someone in person? When are you next on campus? So that we're adapting what support we provide to the availability and the needs of the students. The kinds of supports that we use peer support, quite a number of programs around peer support, because we find having students helping students increases that sense of belonging, the sense of engagement, and the sense of that could be me in 2 or 3 years' time. The proximity to the student's current situation is really quite important. But of course, we support all that with professional teams who bring specific expertise and professional experience to the interaction with students. And we have good mechanisms for triage between the two. A really important aspect of our work is that we want to work with our students as partners as much as possible. We invite students to work with us as designers, advisors, deliverers, and in mentoring. And that means that we're designing both our support services and also our study as closely as possible to what students really want to do. A critical view here is that our students are diverse and they will need flexibility to juggle work, study, caring, study, outside commitments and study, and that we need to take every learner as an individual. The final slide here is about how we put it all together. And this is probably the most important one from my point of view, because it's my job to get all these teams to work well together. And a couple of years ago, we actually did a major restructure, and I was able to be part of designing that. And my contribution was really, well, let's centre it around the interactions that a student has. So we based it on this idea of the student journey. What does the student need to get from the university? And we recognise that student journeys are not linear. It's not a matter of just passing a student from one team to another. The student will build a relationship and they'll go back to the person that they know. So there should be no wrong door, and we should be able to share support for the students. So the portfolio that we built just a few years ago, or rebuilt because we were coalescing teams, was built around this idea of the student journey and bringing everybody together. So all those touch points are talking to each other and understanding how flexibility really works on the ground for our students. I'm going to leave you with just a few ideas here. What we've found is that if we put students into our design and our consideration about flexibility and provision, we save a lot of time and money, and we're much more efficient and effective in what we do. And that's because the students are, as the classic goes, they are experts in their own learning. And if we listen to them up front, then we will get to the right solution much faster. We also know that not only do learners have different needs, but those needs change over time and with external factors. So we can't assume that when a learner comes to us in their year one, that their needs are going to be the same at the end. And in fact, we hope they aren't. We hope they've become much more independent. And we know that offering multiple modes of operation supports learner choice. I just want to finish with just a couple of thoughts about why you would invest all this time and energy to encourage flexibility across your programs and your institution, and just a few challenges that we've seen. For Deakin, the critical point here is that placing flexibility at the heart of our thinking enables diverse learners. It has, for us, fostered innovation. It's got people thinking about, well, how else could we do things, knowing that our learners are diverse and they need diverse experiences. And that innovation has really supported resilience, particularly through the pandemic years, which were pretty tough. And we know that that diversity, that both through provision and through the people that are involved, has really enriched learning and our community. It's not without challenges, though. As I said, we're a big university, so whatever we do, we need to be able to do it at scale. And parallel delivery across multiple modes takes time and effort, and sometimes more money. So you really have to think about what's the benefit to the institution, to the staff, and to the students. We have to build team capability so that people feel confident in working across multiple modes, and we have to manage student disadvantage. And one thing that really came out clearly during the pandemic period was the idea of digital disadvantage, where students were trying to connect but didn't have the means to do so. So it's a big, complex thing. It absolutely needs institutional commitment. And from our experience, it really needs you to think broadly and collectively about how to do it best. And I will pause there, Kay.
Thanks, Liz. There was so much in that. That was really, really fascinating. And I really loved your student journey. You know, it's messy, it's not linear. I just absolutely love that kind of description. And I think that really speaks to people's understanding of what it might be like to be a student, you know, interacting with all those different touch points. Because students, yeah, they don't know where they need to go. And I love the little figures being paused and going backwards and forwards. You know, that was fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing that. Colleagues, I'm sure you've got lots of questions for Liz. Do please keep popping them in the chat. We're going to hand over to David now, and then there'll be a chance for both colleagues to respond to your questions after David's spoken. So over to you, David.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm at Mohamed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence, which is based in Abu Dhabi. We are the only graduate university in the world focusing on these topics. So machine learning, computer vision, robotics, etc., etc. So I'm going to tell you the story of how we design our learning spaces here during a very specific time of our history. So I will talk, of course, about HyFlex. I will talk about the framework, a quick introduction. You will see that we had a research question, some evaluation, and some conclusions. So I'm going to be pretty short on this. So I want to take you back to 2020, back to the future. I hope you remember what happened in 2020. So 2020 was quite a year to remember, and this is when we launched this university, Mohamed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence. So as you can imagine, it was a little bit difficult for various reasons, and I will tell you what happened. So as you can recognize from the right-hand side of the framework, and of course, we had COVID-19. People start forgetting about this, but COVID-19 was significant in most universities around the world. People had to overnight, basically here in the UAE, we had to switch from face-to-face to online without any basically warning and no training. So that was difficult. And we had a few constraints for our faculty members, for our students, for our learning spaces. We had, of course, all the requirements from the regulators. We had physical limitations. You know, it was a complete young campus. We had very few classrooms. We had very few faculty members that could be on campus or that could travel at the launch of the university. So we were thinking about what we could do. But we had in mind a few pedagogical principles for student engagement that you're all familiar with. And you can see how they relate to the framework in the circle and in yellow. So we wanted learning spaces that could support all sorts of teaching modalities. We wanted people, of course, to learn with peers. And remember, we are a graduate university, so we only have masters and PhD students. So it's a bit different from having a lot of undergraduate students. They are research students, so basically they don't have to be on campus all the time. We wanted them to have an experience with faculty, but of course it's COVID-19, so that's a little bit more complicated. The campus environment was also a challenge because we wanted to have spaces, you know, post-COVID, during and post-COVID-19, okay? We knew that this would not last forever, so we need to invest a lot of money and think about what would happen afterwards. And of course, based on the academic challenge, the first point, we wanted, you know, that the students to have active learning with peers and with their colleagues. So as you could see, that was our starting point. We inherited classrooms from a previous university. I will not name it, but you could see that was a little bit creepy. So you could see that we had a whiteboard. We had a table, some chairs, and a few cables. So you had a lot of issues with, of course, video. Do you project what? There's a bit, you see a projector there. We had some audio issues and internet connection. And we very, very quickly realized that this would not fly, would not work for us, for the disciplines that we teach in artificial intelligence in a classroom like that. So there were a lot of challenges and constraints. Of course, you may all think about the first challenge and constraint, which is the money. It's a lot of money that you need to redo your classrooms, to you know, retrofit a building or do something with technology. But we also have the regulators' requirements. I know that some of the people in the audience, they are in the UAE, so they know that we have very thorough, difficult, not very flexible regulators. And we are based in Abu Dhabi, so we have two regulators, which is a little bit more complicated. Of course, we had to ensure a safe learning experience for our students, our faculty, our professional staff. Delivery, okay, Liz mentioned digital competence. We had to make sure that our teachers, our faculty members, TAs, everybody who was online or who could come, hopefully, you know, on campus, knew how to use those classrooms, that technology. And we know that many students or many faculty, they know how to use a mobile phone, but they don't know how to use the LMS, for example, or curriculum management systems. The teaching experience, as I mentioned at the beginning, we had faculty members that could not come to campus. We had people who were very scared of coming to the UAE. The UAE, when we were here, we were confined for at least 8 months inside apartments. So it was very, very, very tough. So many people did not want to come. And so it was very difficult to recruit faculty members. The classrooms, some of the regulations, we had only 6 classrooms at that time, and we could only have 20 students maximum in the classroom. During COVID, 0, but we had to future-proof that, and we had to think about the technology. So this is how it looked like. You can see the framework in blue that you're familiar with from Advanced HE. And this is how we thought about HyFlex and the HyFlex classrooms. So we wanted a safe learning experience. We had to think of the technology, the COVID-19 regulations. So we looked at everything that was happening around the world and tried to benchmark with Australia, with the UK, with Ireland, with the US, Harvard Business School, how they were teaching, how they were functioning during COVID, you know, established universities, because we were absolutely new there. We looked at facilities limitations. We had only 1 building at that time. So we had to look at everything related to environment and the teaching experience of our faculty members. So we looked at HyFlex, and the HyFlex, of course, provides flexibility, and then it provides a lot of choice. But it has to provide an alternative but equal learning experience. So we were very interested in this because, as I mentioned earlier, we have graduate students, so masters and PhD. They come from all over the world. They have 100% scholarship, but they could be based anywhere. And since our faculty could be based anywhere as well, we were thinking about what do we do. Let's say we have students here in the classroom and the faculty member is teaching from China. Can he do that with the systems that we have? With version 0, with the table and the cables, definitely not. It was not working very, very well. What about if we have students, they're all over the world, and the faculty member teaches from his office? Can he do that? Or can he teach from a classroom? What about if we have one in the future after COVID? If we have one faculty member and 3 classrooms, can we connect them together? What about if we have everybody who's not here? The teacher is not here, the faculty, the students are not here, or they are at the library. Can we teach like that? So we're thinking and exploring different things to select a system, and we thought about HyFlex. We know that from the literature, and you're all familiar with that, when you have blended learning classes or online classes, sometimes the students online, they feel completely excluded. They don't feel part of the classroom. So we were very concerned about this. And we wanted them, of course, to participate because it's an equal learning experience, a face-to-face and online. So we wanted them to be socially present or feel like they are present in the classroom. So if there were to be some students in the classroom and online, how can we create that experience? And it's a big challenge, and everybody's facing the same challenge around the world. And I'm not going to say that we solved the problem, but we try to at least minimize the challenge. And of course, we know that pedagogy has to come first. So the technology is great, but we didn't want to have it technology driven. We wanted to look at the pedagogy. So from the V0 that you saw, that creepy classroom, so we had a concept design of the classrooms, how we could change those screens. And as you can see, we had an interactive whiteboard that we could put on the side so students can turn with their chairs. We have podium on casters, we have chairs on casters, we have screens. And at the beginning, we were using WebEx. Many people in the UAE were using WebEx. And we had, as I mentioned, students that were remote, faculty that could be in the classroom and in the office. You remember the 2 screens just now on the interaction like this. So you have the 2 screens right there, the teacher in blue. We had a few chairs with casters. That was in class, campus in Abu Dhabi. So we start with WebEx and Moodle, and with the internet, we try to connect that. And this is how it looked like when we designed one of the classrooms. We had 6 classrooms at the beginning, and we looked at that. So the remote students, as you could see, if there was a teacher, they would see the remote students on that mini screen down there and on a control screen at the back, which was not ideal, even though there's nobody in the classroom, as you can imagine, since it's COVID. So they had to look at that. So we didn't need to link any of the classrooms, because there was no students, okay? We know as well that according to research on learning spaces, video, sound quality, and internet bandwidth is an issue. And you know that if you propose courses online, if people cannot see the video properly, if they cannot hear properly, if people do not have an internet bandwidth, and I'm not talking about internet access and broadband and stuff, because that's another topic today. But we have a lot of people in remote Australia, for example, or in different cities in the UK or anywhere on the planet. Rural India, they don't have access to internet. That was very, very complicated, okay? So why did we choose our HyFlex? Well, because we had a socially distanced campus, as I explained. We thought that would be a more sustainable technology platform for us, as we had to invest a lot of money and time. And we also looked at the EDUCAUSE learning space rating system, and we were looking at how we could adapt it to that particular learning space rating system. So what we did, it's completely different. So we thought about, okay, let's switch to Zoom. Zoom was becoming more popular. And when we contacted Zoom in the UAE, we said, okay, now what we need from you is something very different. We need you to future-proof our classrooms and stitch 3 classrooms, 4 classrooms together. At least start with 3, because COVID will stop. Based on the iteration and the feedback we got from the first iteration, we need to stitch the classrooms together because the instructor will be there. We thought about putting different screens and to connect those classrooms, keep the chairs with casters. And as you can see here, we have a kind of a little thing on a platform here for the faculty to use. And we also thought about tablets, mobile phones. We wanted everybody to be able to access any content that was taught or presented in the classroom from any device, mobile device, because in some countries, many people don't have a laptop, it's too expensive, but at least they can have a phone and they can probably use a Wi-Fi network to access to the content. Okay, so we kept Moodle, we used Zoom, and the Zoom people, they had never done that before. Okay, so we said Harvard Business School did it, so you guys in the UAE, you can try it. And they managed to do it, all right? And so that was good. But of course, we had to think about all the IT things that, all the flashy things that we didn't want. So it was quite a process of discussion about what do we add, what do we remove. So we had a lot of, we had a process of feedback and a lot of issues. So for example, we start from version 0. You remember that lady that was in that creepy space? And this is the design thinking process that we used. We use a lot of data points, and as Liz mentioned, it was a team effort. So we had people from everywhere. Okay, so we had students as partners to try to work with us. We had professional staff in different departments, IT and curriculum design and whatever. We had to look at all sorts of things in terms of hardware integration, multiple device delivery times, availability in the UAE. So they, you know, the lectern that was that I mentioned, you will see a photo in a minute, was designed for us. So it was something off the shelf, but we designed it because some people are left-handed. Some people here, they use different software. We wanted also the faculty to be able to, there's a lot of algorithms, to write on the screen in front of them, never turn the face to the screen or the students, and to be projected on the screen at the back. So that was a request, and of course there was technical issues for this. Many of our faculty members, they use Apple computers, they don't use the regular laptops. We want them to be able to charge and use multiple devices. They can use all sorts of software on the lectern. Okay, so we have different iterations, and at each iterations we had ideation, faculty and student input. And we were testing it. So we would put students outside the room, inside the room, sitting down. We realized that if you are too tall, then you cannot see the screen. If you are 1 meter tall at the back, you can't see the screen. So we had to move the chairs. We had a limitation of space as well. So we did all sorts of tests and evaluation to figure out if it was working. So this was the design that we created. So you can see the lectern that we had. That was a simple lectern with 2 screens. We kept the 2 screens. One was for your PPT, for example, and the second one was the interactive whiteboard. But here, at that time, the faculty member had to go to write on the whiteboard. There was no possibility for her to write on a tablet and project it there. So we started with a lectern. We had the remote students, 2 screens. So you can see it's a little bit bigger than the mini screen that you just saw on the iteration 1, because they want to see that. And we had motion control, voice control cameras. So when the faculty member would move, the camera would move with the person. And if a student would talk, then the camera would turn and switch and project the person. We wanted them to feel that they're in the classroom. And if the person appears, is online on the screen, so the person will appear completely on the screen, okay? But even that, when we tested that, and again, there was a bit of money there spent. So not every university has the money to spend and the time to do all that stuff. Okay. So we had people said the lectern is too narrow. We cannot put multiple. They were putting the tablet falling down, the phone falling down. There were no regular whiteboards for teamwork, so they could. Some faculty members, they said, we don't want only a whiteboard, a digital one. We want a normal whiteboard, you know, the old style with a pen and stuff, with a marker. I said, okay, sure. So we said we can send the students to the left, and then they do some exercise and stuff like that. And I said, okay. Faculty, they had to turn their back, and that they didn't like it, to the audience and to the screens. So if you turn the back to the screen, if it's in a classroom, it's fine. If it's online, they cannot hear anything that you're saying. Remote students was only displayed on one screen. And the screen's height, as I mentioned, some people, they say they couldn't see. So we changed that again. And this is what we did. We put ceiling microphones. So anywhere in the classroom, you could hear anything that was said in the classroom or from the screens. We added 2 whiteboards for teamwork, left and right. And we tailor-made a ILS Synergy DW Smart Lectern. Okay, so with a tablet on it, with plugs on each side for the left-handers, the right-handers, and all sorts of devices that you can put and plug. And we had the digital whiteboard where you can write on the screen to project without turning. Okay, so this is how it looks like, the lectern. All right, so you have different tablets there, and you can work on this, and you can plug other devices wherever you want. The lectern can you know, you can raise the lectern or lower it. You can also tilt it, depending on whatever you wish, and you never have to turn your back again. And as you can see from the screens here, you have the student there, and you can see the multiple students on top of the here that appear in the classroom. Every time the person will talk, the person will appear here. And we put cameras here as well, so everything is projected to everybody, and this moves to the classroom or to the lectern. Okay. Then we changed also. We decided to change the cameras later on. And it's only the lens that moves. The camera does not move anymore. Here, the cameras move. This is first generation cameras. The other one is just the lens. So the camera stays still, but the lens moves like this. And we put more microphones to the classrooms, okay? So to increase social presence, that's a big issue in online learning, and sense of belonging, participation, connectedness, instructors. We added a 55 screen to the back of the room. So based again on feedback, people said, I need another screen at the back. So we put another screen at the back for people for the instructor or for the students. So what does it mean? It means that the instructor can see the PowerPoint presentation right there. He can switch to remote students, or if you want to do classwork and teamwork with your students, you can ask them to sit on the chairs, turn, and they can see the remote students there. Or you can divide it by groups. So for example, the back of the class can turn to that screen and talk to the students there, and then the front class turns to the screen on the right hand side, which is here, to talk to the students here. So basically we have multiple screens. We have 2 screens here, 2 screens in front for the faculty member, and 1 at the back. And the chairs on casters, providing flexibility for people to turn. Evaluation. So we did some evaluation because we need to figure out if this was working. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Educo's learning space rating system is online, the score sheet. So they have different sections. Okay, so technology and tools inclusion, which is one of the thing of the framework as well. V0 was 39% on all the scoring, and we ended up at the iteration 2 at 85%, which was pretty good. We actually wrote a research article. If anybody's interested in the audience, I can send it to you, or you can find it online with my name and other colleagues about how we design it. We describe it. And to conclude, so for us, HyFlex was working and still working. We still use those classrooms, and we use the exactly same techniques for our lecture theaters. Now we have more than 6 classrooms. We have lecture theaters with multiple screens, etc., etc. It's complex. It involves a lot of people, so cross-departmental. You cannot design like in the old times, like a language studio And then when the language teachers go there, students, they cannot use it. So everybody has to be involved, students included. It's lengthy. It took us a few months to design these different iterations, 6 to 8 months. It's very costly, okay? But in terms of its investment, now we're in 2025. This was 2021, 22. We're still using it, and we're still using the same techniques because we benchmarked it and we always try to improve it. It's assumptions challenging because we test something and then it doesn't work. We think that that screen will be positioned there and everybody says, no, I don't want the screen there. It doesn't help me at all. So we have to change that. It's iterative. It's a lot of iterations, a lot of feedback points, a lot of things to work on. But it was working, and it's still working. And we still have faculty members. It's a research-intensive university. As we speak, there's a big conference here. Half of our staff are not there, but they still have to teach some of their classes, and they are teaching it remotely. So it's still working with students. Some of them are in the classroom with TAs. Some of them are at home. So it's still working very, very well. I think it's going to continue to work for a few years to come until anything else is working, but it works for our disciplines. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, David. As you know, I had the privilege of seeing that classroom a couple of years ago, and absolutely fascinating. And I really love that design thinking approach, bringing all of the stakeholders in. And I appreciate many colleagues in the room won't be able to invest as much as you guys had the opportunity to do in that space. But I think some of those principles, the learning space rating system and that design thinking approach, I think can really help colleagues do as much as they can with what they have. Colleagues, Liz has been doing fantastic work answering all the questions in the chat. So if you've got any further questions for Liz, then please pop those in the chat and we'll have a couple of minutes at the end. And if any have got questions for David, please pop them in the chat as well. While you're thinking of those, I'll just share a few more slides from myself, and then we can have a look and see what appears in the chat. So I think both speakers have really identified what a complex area and space this is, and there's many dimensions to it, from all of the support around the student to very pragmatic solutions to how we bring students together in the classroom. And again, in David's presentation, that getting that social cohesion. We know that learning happens socially, so how can we really get that social learning to work if students are remote or distant from the classroom? So lots of issues there. So how can Advanced HE help you with this? We have lots of offers, and this I don't want to end with a sales pitch because it's always a bit dull, but we can do consultancy. That we've got lots of colleagues who've worked with institutions in the UK and globally to support them to think about the challenges that have been highlighted and actually being resolved by our two speakers. We can also look at your whole portfolio and think about how support your course teams or program teams or faculties to review that, to embed that flexibility and choice into your programs. And also, of course, and I think was picked up by colleagues there, to support your staff to think about how they would what skills they need to teach in a more flexible way, or offer this choice to students. We also are always looking out for other examples. I think Liz and David are both going to be hard shoes to follow, but we're always looking out for speakers to join us on our podcast. So we've got a podcast coming up on flexible learning, and we are actually still looking for one further speaker around that. So if you've got something interesting to say and would like to join a podcast, then we would love to hear from you. And of course, we've got all of our conferences, further webinars in the Advanced HE, the Student Success Framework series. Apologies. I think that's the end of my slides. So I'm going to stop sharing. If I can get back to the meeting room. There we go. Okay, colleagues. Right. people asking David the tricky question, how much did it all cost? I didn't even dare think about that. And actually Paulette's also asked a question about cost as well. You know, are online and in-person students paying the same fees? Liz, do you want to just kind of answer that one?
Sure. Yes, they do, Paulette. We charge the same course fees for online and on-campus students. There's a lot of debate in the literature about whether or not one is cheaper than the other. And as you can see from David's presentation, there's a lot of hidden cost sometimes in online delivery, whether it's the kit that the teachers are using, whether it's the developmental money, whether it's the investment that the students have to make. We charge the same on the grounds that we expect the students to have an equivalent and equitable experience, whether they're with us online or on campus.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, you know, anybody that does online and in-person teaching will know it's you know, a similar investment of staff time to develop the resources to, you know, if you want to give an equitable student experience to both online and in-person students, you have to kind of invest an awful lot of resources in there. I think that's all. I think you've done such a fantastic job of answering all the questions. If anybody's got one that I've missed, or if either speaker can spot one I've missed.
David, there was the question about what it costs to put up a room like that. I admire your persistence with it, because we've tried not as comprehensively as you, and I know what a journey it can be.
Yeah, it was quite something. And we tried to source the best cameras, the best screens. Of course, screens now are cheaper, but you know, the size of screens that we needed for a classroom is you cannot just put like a mini tablet. You need huge screens to be able to, you know, for students to see it from a camera or from the back of the room.
Yeah. One thing I would say on that though, David Kay, is it's a lot to do with institutional ethos. So when I joined Deakin 10 years ago, it's got 4-5 campuses. We're up to 7 now because we've got 2 international campuses, and it connects its campuses online all the time. So the staff practice what they do with the students. They are online all the time, talking to their colleagues and working collectively online. So it's an environment which they take forward into their teaching in that same vein.
Yeah, Liz, I think that's a really good point, and it actually kind of picks up the kind of comment around attendance. And I think if you're getting that culture of we engage online, we engage in person, then it probably doesn't impact attendance. But I don't know if you want to comment further on that one.
Yes, I will. So attendance has dropped off since the pandemic, and it hasn't come back to pre-pandemic levels. That's true across Australia, and I suspect worldwide as well. And it reflects the growing movement of people who want to work from home. They don't want to spend time commuting. That's true of students as well. So I think that's going to be an ongoing issue. So the important thing here is to find out what students want to do when they come to campus, what is important for them enough for them to invest in the journey. And it's the collegiate work that David's talking about, when they're in a room with colleagues working together, studying together and doing group work, that's what brings them back.
And remember, we also have, they have a choice now. They can choose it online, as you mentioned. They can choose to come face-to-face. There's a choice that they have to make. They can choose to do, you know, online and sometimes face-to-face. But there's another factor, which is inflation. You know, it's transportation is not cheap. Many students, if they don't work, taking a bus or the metro or driving, the petrol around the world has increased exponentially. And many people, they just want to stay at home. Or they have to do, as you mentioned, they have to do a couple of jobs to be able to afford their education nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And I think we're seeing that globally. You know, I always think, you know, does your session, is it worth the price of the bus fare and the cup of coffee that you need to buy when you get on campus? You know, what is the value of that? You know, and you've really got to make sure that students value it. Colleagues, I've absolutely loved this morning. It was definitely worth getting up early from. The sun as well. I say the sun's come up. It's definitely got lighter outside my window. Thank you so much, David and Liz, for giving up your time to give such insightful presentations. And thank you to the audience for getting up or staying up, whichever you've done, to join us. And the recordings, and I think the presentations will be made available with the permission of the speakers after the session. If you haven't had enough of flexible learning, we've got another webinar at lunchtime for the different time zones, so you can join us again. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.